hand. There we go. I see
There
you.
we
Video.
go. Boom.
Perfect.
I know, I'm looking rough, you guys. It's quarantine. I don't even know what day it is.
You got to the meeting on time, 6:30 promptly.
And
Okay,
just
let's
to let
go
everyone
ahead.
know, we're obviously recording this. It's live on YouTube. It's live on the city website. And Ethan and I are going to be monitoring if there's any background noise. We might mute you, but you always have the option to unmute yourself.
So everybody behave. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
And then I'm going to share our welcome screen. So,
Oh, hey.
all right. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful. All right.
Okay, so the meeting has been called to order. Welcome, everybody. Ethan, roll call of members, please.
Poland,
Here.
Kaplan,
Present.
Lemaire,
Present.
Lucas,
Present.
Miles,
Present. Seems fine.
Miller,
Present.
Wyman.
Virtually present.
You have it loud.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, audience participation period. Speaker limited to 5 minutes. Do we have any audience speakers?
There is no audience participation.
No virtual audience members. Thank you. On to item 4, consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from the February 11th, 2020 meeting. Any comments, criticism, suggestion, changes, edits?
I just had one minor typo on page 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th sentence down. There's just a little typo that's it should have been duplicated on instead of duplicate Don.
Okay,
I will make that change.
I'm sorry, I hate to be that person.
Good. You're fine.
I have one on page 6. We have one commissioner who marches to his own band. And he decided not to be on the CAT. And I'm kidding around here now, but Commissioner Wyman, at the very bottom, it says Commissioner stated he does not want to serve on the CAT.
Right.
Let's add Commissioner Wyman just to make sure.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Good clarification.
Anybody else?
I'm good.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
moved and seconded that we approve the February 11th, 2020 minutes. Now, do we have to vote individually?
Yeah, I'll do the vote by roll call.
Okay, thank you.
Poland,
Aye.
Kaplan,
Aye.
Lemaire,
Aye.
Lucas,
Aye.
Miles,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, next we have new business, formation of the Citizens Advisory Task Force, CAT, for the update to the master plan. Does staff want to give a quick summary of that process, or should we just go to commissioner reports?
This is Chris Kramer, Community Development Director. I will just say that, of course, this process got started. The application process got started. The appointment process got started pre shelter-in-place world, and the two commissioners who were selected to do the interviews were very flexible and adaptive, and we were able to still perform the interviews of the 9 applicants, ending up in a recommendation to you of the 4 candidates. So first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Holland for for really being flexible on all of this, and it was a less than ideal scenario, but we really got through it, I think, in a really good way. And so really what you guys are doing tonight is hearing that recommendation of those 4 folks, formally forming the Citizens Advisory Task Force, and then finalizing that roster tonight for the creation of that, so that we can get them started. And we will talk in staff business about what getting them started actually means. So that's all staff has. Thanks also to Ethan for helping coordinate all of this. Again, this was a trickier situation than normal. So thanks to both of them. Chairman, I would recommend that we turn it over to the interviewing duo to give an overview of the process.
Thank you. We appreciate that. So could we get a brief report from either Commissioner Holland or Commissioner Lucas? And thank you for your efforts, by the way.
Earl, I'm happy to yield my time to you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Well, there were 9 applicants for the 4 at-large positions, I think, as you all know. And as Chris mentioned, Bill and I were charged with interviewing those candidates and then recommending 2 to the commission. And as you all know as well, we couldn't do it in person, which was a bit unfortunate. But I will say that we did it by Skype, and Bill set up a really, really great setup for me to come to his house, and so at least we could 2 be together while we Skyped with everybody and maintain social distancing. It was really a terrific setup. So and it did work pretty well given the fact that we couldn't be there in person with the people. We didn't really have any formal rubric with set metrics. We essentially based our recommendations on the information contained in the candidates' applications, and then answers to our set of questions, as well as other information gleaned from the phone interviews. We also tried to take into consideration gender diversification, CHV district diversification, and we also tried, we wanted to try to get some newer members of the community, because we were mindful we had seen the other members that council had appointed, as well as ourselves. And, we really have, I think, a terrific group of people that are going to be on this CAT, but folks with long time associations with the community. And so we were looking to try to get some folks maybe with a newer perspective. The questions which we designed just basically to get the conversation going. We had 4 of them really. We basically said, what are the top 3 issues or topics that the master plan process should address, and why? We asked, how do you feel about the CAT being a sounding board as opposed to a policy or decision-making board? We asked them, will you be able to make the CAT a priority, and with exceptions for emergencies, commit to making all of the meetings? We felt like it was important that people be willing to do that. And then we asked them sort of a philosophical one that was kind of phrased as, while we want a diverse CAT with members who bring varying areas of expertise and proponents of diverse issues, we also think that it is important that each member seek to find the best solution for the village as a whole, which may go against the personal choice of any member. Do you agree or disagree? And so those were the questions that we put to every candidate. Again, just to kind of get a conversation going. And so we had good conversation with all 9 of them. One thing that Bill and I both felt was that all the applicants were qualified, and we both remarked, as many in this community have, that we're all pretty blessed to have so many capable residents willing to volunteer their time. And this was no exception in terms of the folks that were willing to put themselves up for this. At the end of the interviews, we kicked around the pros, the pluses and the minuses of each candidate. And quite frankly, we were pretty closely aligned in our assessments. Ultimately, we selected Janie Carpenter and she's from District 2, Tiffany Sullivan, who's really a very newcomer to the community, from District 5, Tom Barsh from District 3, and Bob Serrata from District 6. We can talk. You have their resumes and applications in front of you. We did thank all of the candidates during our calls for volunteering, and we encouraged all of them to attend the CAT meetings as well as public input meetings, even if they weren't selected, that this was an open process and that we were really going to be trying to get as much public input as we could. And we'd hope that even if to those that weren't selected, that they'd still be willing to show up if they so desired, and particularly to our public input meetings. And so that's essentially the process that we used, and we ultimately came down to those 4 and recommended them to the full commission. So if there's questions, I'm sure Bill and I can answer whatever you'd like.
So I had a general question. I don't think this is inappropriate, but could you just run through the list and give us 2 or 3 attributes that you thought would really contribute to the process for each candidate?
For each candidate that we
Each of
recommended?
each of the 4 that were selected.
Sure, and Bill, chime in on this. I think, certainly Janie Carpenter, who's done a lot for this village and has a close association with the land preserve. Very dedicated person, I think, at the end of the day, and somebody who really comes across in our dealings, but also in terms of the interviews with regard to like I say, her dedication and seriousness about these issues. And then again, having that land preserve relationship, we thought was probably a good thing in terms of, again, getting organizations that have a relationship to the community sort of involved, even though she's not representing the land preserve, but we know she has that connection.
Great. Bill, anything to add there?
With Janie, I'll say she's a professor over at DU, and she specifically moved all her classes so she wouldn't have a conflict.
Great point.
Wow.
Impressed with that. She also did her homework, and I have to say, she and Tom really did a nice job of doing their homework.
Right.
And were really insightful. I'll go ahead and add a few other things. Tiffany is new to the community. She's from Highland Park, Texas, right outside of Dallas. And she's participated in similar type forums, and a very articulate young mom, and new to the community. And we thought she was delightful and very energetic. And then Bob Serrata has not been terribly involved in civic activities, but wants to. He's a realtor, specializing in residential, and is very community minded and very thoughtful in his responses too. But I will say everybody was good. It was difficult to make a decision, and I have to give special kudos to Ethan, because he set up the technology and hung with us. So thank you very much for everything he made to make it possible and work well.
Thank you.
So wait, I have a question. Set up the technology. Were you in a room with these applicants questioning them, or was it 6 feet apart from them in the room? But
So,
was it in the same format?
Yeah, Earl and I were in the same room, but we were more than 6 feet apart. We were safe, and we had a computer, much like what we're talking on, but there was no video. It was all audio. And then it was set up so that no one else could be on the call but the 2 of us and the applicant. And so there was a security nice reports that they set up, which was, I thought, pretty ingenious. So on the half hour, they would call in, and we would know, and they couldn't call in if we were on the line, but that didn't happen anyway. So we chatted for 20 minutes with each applicant, plus or minus, and then we discussed for 5 or 10 minutes, and then the next applicant came on, and it went perfectly. Everybody was on time, on schedule. Not a
Great. Good deal.
It really did. That's a great summary.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, good. Any questions from the other commissioners of our two interviewers?
No,
No?
no questions.
I don't have any.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your efforts, Bill and Earl. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I guess we have a motion that's somewhat lengthy. Are we ready to move to the resolution? Or do we need additional discussion of anything? Does anybody have any questions on anything else about the formation of this task force?
Okay. I have a question, and it's a very broad question, which makes a lot of sense to us right now, but may not make sense. That I think we have to keep in the forefront of what we're doing. As we come together as, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, plus people from the staff, I began thinking this afternoon, looking at how many people, how many individuals the city council will appoint to the CAT commission, and how many we will. And we could at any one time get 10, 15, or 20 people on for our meetings to try to keep this thing together. And if anyone here thinks that COVID-19 is going away at the end of June, it's not. July, August, and we're going to have to, and we'd want to maintain the same standards wherever it takes us and whenever it takes us. And I think that we should wonder if we want to hold this off. I know we have the 10-year rule and we're already 12 years over, but have any of you thought about this now, wondering if this is the most effective way for us to get a long-standing participant in the CAT committee? And I think anyone who was selected would want to do that. And I just want to be sure that we're all aware that this is the reality that we face.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
I think that's an excellent question. And I know we have on the agenda discussion of how the city intends to operate. So maybe we segue into that. Okay, Chris.
Perfect.
Thank you.
That sounds exactly right. That's what I was going to say, is that under staff business, we were going to have a discussion about the master plan and how it may function, what we would propose with the CAT, but then also have a discussion with you about regular P&Z business and what that looks like for the short term as well. So that's sort of all teed up for the staff business portion of the agenda. But Commissioner Kaplan, you are spot on with your line of questioning. I think that is extremely appropriate and timely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'd say, and you're going to talk about how business is going to go on just in general and what have you. And I think Dory's comment goes to, I think, saying, hey, if we thought this thing was going to be pushed off a year, does it make sense to kind of just put this in abeyance, as opposed to, do we think, because it's going to be delayed. I mean, our schedule is going to be delayed on the master plan. And the question is, hey, if it's a 3-month delay, does that make sense? If you don't think that it is, and it's going to be 9 months, then why are we rushing into it, type of a thing? I mean, that's probably where you're coming from, I would think, right?
Exactly right. And Britt, who's on this call with Rick Engineering, you had the chance to meet him. We've talked a little bit about some scenarios. They don't represent all the scenarios, but we'll kind of show you a couple of examples of scenarios. If we have shelter in place orders that go into 2021 or something, that's impossible to sort of forecast. And so we're not tackling those quite yet. What we have begun to do is tackle a sort of a short-term shelter in place and a medium length shelter in place and what that could look like. So we're prepared to show you some timelines for that tonight.
Well, and in addition to sheltering in place versus we're not sheltering in place, but social distancing is still going, it will be in effect even when we're no longer
doubt about it.
sheltering in place. And so, for instance, for public meetings, that could have an impact. Because I think we all agree that when we get to that public input part, that's going to be a critical piece.
Yeah.
We're going to want as many people.
No doubt about it.
They're participating as much as we can.
So one thing I would add that we all know is that this isn't going to change until we have a vaccine. And it's going to take 1-2 years to get that vaccine, but we feel safe as individuals and as a community that wants to come together and really assure that voices have honestly been heard and directly heard. And I'm not implying any criticism of any of this, but the reality, as I said before, of what we're dealing with. And is that what we're willing to adhere to?
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, if I can chime in, I'm in complete agreement. I think it's going to be a cautious forward march. It's going to slow the process down.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I think is interesting is I've seen a greater sense of community, and people are getting out and being neighborly. And I think in some respects, paying more attention to their environment and to our city, and the Highline Canal is jammed. And I think there's a silver lining in all this, or I hope there is that we get thoughtful discourse. But I do think moving forward, we have to be and respectful and careful as this process goes. But I think we've got great technology. I think this tonight is working rather well. And it's just a different way of thinking. But I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm. Now we have 12 on this call now, right? On the Zoom?
Yes.
Is that the total?
Correct. And I've been on Zoom calls as high as 100.
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on the subject in general? And then if not, why don't we take a look at the resolution?
And we do have a suggested motion in the staff report. If anybody, language for a motion in the staff report, if anybody would like to take a look.
I read it and I thought it looked good. Does anybody need some time to read through it? It's 2.5 pages long.
I didn't have any suggestions.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I think it's well done. I'd move to approve.
Any
I'll
second?
This is
Okay.
Britta. I'll second that.
Thank you, Britta. So it's been moved and seconded. And I guess we go to a vote. Ethan?
Poland,
Aye.
Kaplan,
Aye.
Lemaire,
Yes.
Lucas,
Aye.
Miles,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wyman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so I will move to the next item on the agenda, which would be reports from any members of planning and zoning. Do we have any?
No.
We heard from Bill and Earl already. Anybody else have any items to discuss? Okay. Thank you. Then the next item would be the discussion of City Planning and Zoning Commission operations in the age of COVID-19. I'll turn it back to Chris.
Good evening. So I do have a few items to review. One talking about the regular business, another talking about the master plan. First of all, in regards to the regular business of planning and zoning, we do currently have one active case. It will not be ready in the May timeframe, so we do not need to worry about that right in the current time. But I can tell you, the city is not in a position to have public hearings where the public would want to come speak, to get technical, for quasi judicial hearings in a virtual format like this. I think that is a view a lot of Front Range communities have taken. There are obviously some examples of some communities who are getting more aggressive and who are trying to do more public hearings in electronic format. But as we've begun to talk here tonight, there are challenges. And if we want to ensure that there are a variety of ways for our citizens, our residents, to have their voice be heard, electronic only creates some obvious challenges. So I think for the time being, this is obviously a city council decision on what kinds of actions and cases will be heard, working with the city manager. So right now, those cases are not going to be scheduled. If this goes on for a really long period of time, if there's some other jurisdictions that start going down this road and start having some success, maybe that changes. But right now, I think regular cases will probably not be coming before you in the short term. And Kathy, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that. Kathy and I have been chatting about this, and I know she's also been chatting with Jim, city manager, and so it's a topic at the top of a lot of people's minds right now, planners, attorneys, city managers, because it does represent a real encumbrance to folks who are trying to keep things moving forward. It brings their whole project to a stop. And so, so Kathy, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
No, I think there, as Chris mentioned, there are some communities that have a giant pipeline, that have very pressing, time sensitive applications, and they have made a policy decision to proceed with a means to facilitate a decision on that, those types of applications. So it is, those communities are at the vanguard. They're making some risk-based assumptions and choices, and it's perfectly logical to do that in that case, but it is riskier. And so I fully support this option at this point in time. There's nothing bearing down on the city that requires it to stick its neck out on quasi-judicial matters. And so, yeah, I've worked with the city manager and Mr. Kramer, and I've seen other jurisdictions that have written policies to allow that kind of thing, but we're early days yet, and I foresee some problems somewhere, and we don't have to facilitate those problems right now. So that's where we are on this.
I was on a state teleconference this last week, and there was this exact discussion both about plan making, community engagement, plan making in the current environment, but also quasi-judicial public hearings. A really qualified, sharp attorney gave the presentation, and his view was, that there might be some legal opportunities to explore that. And there's probably, you can probably write policies that allow you to go forward on that, like Kathy mentioned. But due process hasn't necessarily been totally heard in court yet. So there's not a lot of case law to rely on, which means the Vanguard statement that Kathy used is excellent. That's an excellent descriptor. I mean, those folks are going to be at the tip of the spear when people are opposed to an approval or somebody who gets denied. They'll have all sorts of opportunities to challenge those either way. And so right now, I think for us, I would not expect to see a lot of, in the short term, the next 2 to 3 months, maybe longer, but at least for the next 2 to 3 months, probably no cases coming before you.
And just to add on to what Chris said, their due process is a 3-pronged stool. And the second one of that is an opportunity to be heard. And so that is just more challenging in this environment. And in particular, not just quasi-judicial, but the types of land use applications that would come before you often require in-depth examination and discussion of exhibits and spacing and dimensions, and that really require, I think, for an adequate opportunity to respond, in most cases, more access. We can put documents online, we can, do all that thing, but going into City Hall and looking at the plans and asking questions that might normally be an opportunity for people, that just doesn't exist right now. So that's kind of where we are.
Agreed. So I think that's where we sit with regular business. As we move into a discussion about the master plan, first of all, I do think that forming the CAT is beneficial. There is one sort of remaining item I do want to throw out to the commission to start thinking about, and maybe even if you want to do something tonight, you certainly could. But I do think since the P&Z formed the commission, you have the opportunity to help designate a chair for that. And so, I don't really, it's up to the commission as to what that looks like. I would personally recommend, since the charter provision lays out the role of shepherding this process through, I certainly would recommend that a P&Z commissioner act as chair, but it's really something for you guys to decide. And so again, you don't have to necessarily take action on this tonight. You can if you want, but it's just something I wanted to plant some seeds about.
Let's just do it. Let's just have Lemaire be the chair.
So
That's
go
what
ahead.
I was thinking.
Commissioner Miller, what did you just say?
I said you should be the chair ×2.
So we've talked about it a little bit one-on-one, and I definitely think it should be somebody on our commission, if for no other reason to keep the communication very tight and direct between the two, the board and the CAT. I'm not jumping at the opportunity to do it. I would do it, especially if somebody wanted to be a co-chair with me, or if somebody else felt passionate about it and wanted to be the chair, I would defer to that too. So what do the rest of you guys think?
I'll be your wing.
I'm sorry, this is Laura. I was just looking at the resolution, and I believe it says the task force chooses its own chairperson.
Oh,
Yes.
I didn't catch that. Okay. Sorry about that.
Well, you should have brought that up before we passed the resolution.
Well, that's my fault then. Good catch, Laura. Good catch. All right. Well, nonetheless, I still think it's an opportunity for you guys to, think about that, plant some seeds, and, think about how we want to structure that as we move forward. For me, I think the biggest role of the chair is going to be ensuring that the function of the CAT stays in what you set it out to be, you being the commission, and not letting them get scope creep that gets a little bit bigger than just a feedback group and a sounding board. I think that's the biggest benefit of the chair, and their biggest responsibility in some ways is to just keep that responsibility in check. So let's talk a little bit about the master plan process.
Hold on a minute. Hey, Chris, let's continue that for just a second. What do the rest of the commissioners feel about whether it should be a board member who's the chair?
Well, my view was I thought that it should have been, and I'm feeling a bit remiss, like probably everybody, saying that I missed that in the resolution. We probably should have caught that.
Right.
Because if this is planning and zoning's bailiwick to a large degree, is it an absolute necessity? No, but it seemed to me that having a planning and zoning person be the chair is the way that you want to go. And I also wanted to come back on a comment that was just made as well, that it's important that no matter who it is that we don't let, that person doesn't let, and really to all of us who are going to be sitting on it, that you don't want to see that cat move towards a view where the members want to start making decisions. Again, it's a sounding board, and that's what we want it to be. And I think that probably is really what the role of that leader, the chair, is going to be, is to make sure that process is always kind of going in that direction, that we're getting input, everybody's feeling welcome, but we're not allowing it to get to a point where all of a sudden, demands are starting to be made or what have you. That's where that's my view, is that we don't want it to go that way. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think those are good observations.
When do we define semi-rural? For 2-3 years now, I've been asking, what does semi-rural mean? What are the criteria? What are the components of? What are the, do we let the Citizens Advisory Committee and its chair and planning and zoning people to get together and define it? Makes sense. Or do you want to go into those meetings with a practice or a elementary definition? And I say elementary because every time I ask someone, what does it mean? I get nothing. Well, we like trees. We want to keep some trees over here. And then so I stand by that question.
Commissioner Kaplan, I couldn't agree more, and I know you are not the only one who wants to provide more definition to that. If the commission recalls, in the RFP and in the initial overview that we all had together, in addition to sort of reviewing a lot of the previous master plan goals and objectives, there were also, I think, 9, and Britt's on this call as well with Rick Engineering, I think there were 9 sort of key topics that we wanted to make sure that we hit. And this semi-rural question, what is semi-rural to this community, is one of those. And so I think early on in this process, and this process is changing before our eyes to some degree, but early on in this process, we need to start going about asking those kinds of questions. And so it would be a key component of the first town hall that we would host.
Mm-hmm.
There was some discussion about a survey. That would be a great opportunity to get some feedback there. We obviously have the opportunities for an online survey. And then there's, I absolutely think that's a great, talk about a sounding board for the CAT.
Exactly.
What a great thing to get to get feedback on. So I absolutely think, but that's not the only one, Commissioner Kaplan. I will tell you, I think on all 9 of those critical issues, we need to do that kind of investigative early exploration of getting that feedback. How can we hear from folks on all those key items? So I think you're spot on. I can't tell you what date we're going to start asking or what it's going to comprise of. I think some of this is going to start to be hashed out, frankly, by you guys. And this is a great segue, if you don't mind, Chair.
Sure.
The master plan process itself, I think some of the discussions we had about public hearings apply to this as well. And, I think my recommendation to you, staff's recommendation, and I've had conversations with the city manager about this as well. We do not have any kind of funding in place that's set to expire. This is not based on grant funding. There are no large construction projects or city capital projects that are dependent upon the completion of this plan at a certain time frame. And what we do know is it has been a little while since we've done one, and everyone, there's unanimous support behind the idea of this being a community-based plan. And frankly, having a community-based plan where the P&Z is having policy discussions in this format, it offers opportunities for folks to question the process. And I certainly think that's going to also apply with the CAT as well. So, my recommendation is that we do what we can in this time frame. And I have an email prepared to send first thing in the morning where I let folks know who, all 17 people who are on the CAT to say congratulations. And it goes to you guys as well. Congratulations for being put on the CAT. Unfortunately, we don't foresee the opportunity to have in-person meetings for the near future, so it's somewhat on hold. However, there is opportunities to do homework, and working with Britt, I think we've got a great list. Honestly, plenty of reading for a while. So I I saw the eye rolls.
Plenty of time to read, right?
That's right.
Oh.
But I do think we can continue to make progress. I don't think just because we don't have an in-person town hall with the community as a whole, and maybe just because we don't have you guys, if you guys wanted to have P&Z meetings to start talking about policy questions, if you wanted to have CAT meetings to start talking about these kinds of questions, there are tools out there. It's just that my recommendation is to have a meaningful process that is validated through public involvement and engagement. Is it possible? Yes. Do we have an external pressure that really requires us to do it? No. And, I mentioned that statewide teleconference I was on earlier this week. The other portion of it where they talked about plan making, they spent a lot of time talking about some of the tools, but at the end of it, the people on the panel were like, look, if a lot of these tools that we're laying out, they help you, they allow these things to move forward. If you're halfway through the process, you can keep going. And they literally closed the whole portion of the session with this. If you haven't started your plan making process quite yet, you might want to consider just hitting the pause button for 3 or 4 months just to see where the world is. It was a fascinating, I wasn't in the room with anybody else to kind of look at them and, say, oh, look at that. But it sort of described our situation perfectly. And so, my recommendation is that we do what we can. We do as much homework as we can. Maybe we can even continue to drop some questions for folks to think about, but not necessarily make policy discussions, or certainly not make policy decisions for the short term, and then we'll reassess. I do have, Britt is also on the call, and we've got a few slides to show you how this may play out. So I'm going to turn it over to Britt Palmberg with Rick Engineering now.
Good evening. So I'm going to press the share button, share, and go to the slides here. Can everyone see the slides? Or the slides on the screen? Okay, great.
Yep. That's the last slide, though. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So to Chris's point, we are have started on our initial analysis for the master plan update, working on the community assessment. So we've been gathering data, JS data we have from the city. We're analyzing the traffic data, demographics, economics, kind of the meat and potatoes of existing conditions analyses that we would normally do anyway, and does not require community input really at this point. It's kind of the homework for the consultant team to do in the background. Been working on that for the last basically 3-4 weeks, and we'll continue for the next handful of weeks on that as well. There's also been some stuff we've been doing in the background in terms of building the tools we need for community engagement, and that includes building the project website. We've built kind of the bones of it right now. We have the colors of Cherry Hills Village on there and so forth. We have some background information. We've got it set up to keep adding more content as we go through the process here. And we've also gathered the list of stakeholders, basically community contacts in Cherry Hills Village from the city staff. And we'll be kind of building our database of contact information to use when the time is right to go to more of the macro level community outreach. So there's, to Chris's point, there's homework we're doing right now, and there's homework that folks on the CAT and you all can be doing the next couple of months as well. I wanted to talk about two different schedule scenarios, and Chris mentioned that there could be myriad different scenarios really to look at based upon really how this all plays out with the current situation. Now, the first scenario is essentially sticking to the original schedule we developed working with city staff back in February and March, which would call for CAT getting going in the next month or 2 months, and our first community meeting basically happening the first part of summer, sometime in June, that would follow the initial schedule. The second scenario would delay community meetings really till the fall, in September or October timeframe. So here's the first scenario really. And again, this one, you know, is perhaps less likely given what's going on here, but it will just depend upon how the situation plays out. We would essentially be at the first community meeting by June. We would have creation of some general kind of discussions of alternatives and choices for the major policy issues during the summer, but come back for a second meeting during the fall, be at the third meeting and arrival at a preferred plan direction by the first part of 2021, by January of 2021, and essentially work on the plan document during the winter months of January, February, March, and essentially be complete with the process by June of 2021. That's the schedule, again, that we've established from the get-go. That's kind of before everything has been modified here with the schedule. Here's a second scenario. This one.
Real quick, Britt.
Yes. Yep.
Just back on that previous schedule. It's so funny because these are interesting times indeed. We worked on this schedule and we were talking about this one as late as like early last week. And just 1 week has gone by since we've talked about this specific one, and it already feels so unlikely. You know, and it's just one more week since we talked about it. So things keep changing, and we'll all have to sort of adapt and be flexible as we go forward. But the odds of the scenario one happening, you know, every day that goes by, that you know we're still in lockdown, and the numbers that you see from CDPHE are what they are, the less likely scenario one is to happening.
Right. So second scenario would essentially give us more time to do our homework, our community assessment work, and so forth. And certainly we wouldn't be going at full bore during the whole summer doing the community assessment. We'd be working on that the next few months. There might be a bit of a pause period where we have time, you know, virtually perhaps with you all, with the CAT, to review information we have prepared concerning where Cherry Hills Village has come the last 10 years, where we are now, some of the key issues we're uncovering from that community assessment process. We would have time during the summer to do that before we would launch kind of the larger efforts of community outreach. The second scenario, again, calls for the first major town hall essentially by the fall, September, October, and then going through the same kind of cascading of events beyond that to go through creation of alternatives, preferred plan direction, final plan. We think that we can actually make up some time during this scenario. So essentially the first scenario you saw there called for the completion of the overall plan by June of 2021. We can make up some time as we go through the process. And this one calls, for example, the overall process ending by August of 2021. So an extension of only a couple months there. You know, the overall goal is not to elongate this way far out in the future, to be efficient, but again, to have meaningful public input at the right times and when the situation is right. So public outreach you see on both of these scenarios, including this one, number 2, public outreach really continues throughout the entire process. And down at the bottom, there are denotations of where CAT meetings may occur, study sessions with the city council and with you all at the P&Z. And those occur kind of before and after major town hall meetings. You know, it's a pretty common scenario in a community planning effort for us to go before the CAT and review with them. Hey, here's the concepts we're thinking of showing the public. And we go talk with the public about that and then come back the next month or afterwards and discuss what we heard from the community. That's a pretty common kind of cycle in community planning. There'd be more sessions towards the end of the process, obviously going through more of the details of the actual plan document, discussion about implementation, things like that. So a couple other things in terms of homework assignments. Chris alluded to that here in terms of the email he's going to send out tomorrow, which we work with the city staff to create. There's a whole host of different plans to review from the past, but there's other things to think about as well. So the actual name of the process, we had a kickoff discussion with the city staff back in March. We kicked around a few ideas of, besides just calling it kind of the very formalistic term of the master plan update, oftentimes communities come up with a more branded term for what a community plan update should be called. One term I think is probably the most popular so far that we've, in our minds, would be something called the village vision. So it's looking at confirming the vision, seeing what the vision would be for the next 20 years. Could be something like Cherry Hill's vision or Plan CHV. I think one thing you all can think about the next few months would be, is there some sort of, key words you want to be using in terms of the community outreach materials we want to put forth once we get to that point to advertise this process, make it known in the minds of people in Cherry Hills Village, as opposed to just the master plan update. They'd say, oh yeah, I'm working with the village vision. I took that survey, or I'm going to meeting next Thursday. It helps to get people more tied in with the overall process. So I think, there's these three here to think about, but if you all have other ideas, especially as you get into the first meetings of the CAT, that is going to be a topic of discussion. What do we call this process? Is there a key name we want to use going forward? The second is to think about what a potential community survey may entail. So in our scope of work that we put forth in our RFP submittal, we talked about community surveys, could be online surveys that we would do throughout the process. Oftentimes, as you go through a community planning process and have a community meeting, you would have an online survey that would be kind of dovetailed with the content we would show to the public at a town hall meeting, for example, for the folks who couldn't attend in person, and would be open for a period of time. So there's those surveys that can be done along the way to talk about different alternatives, the preferred plan elements, and even the final versions of the plan. But this community survey up front, the potential community survey that Chris alluded to, a lot of communities will do a more detailed community survey, especially at the front end of a process, to really tease out the key issues and the key elements of the community vision people want to see discussed in the future. And it's a bit more of an in-depth survey. So from the 2008 survey, if you look at Appendix C from that document, there's a very robust, very detailed, and from comments we've heard, I think it was viewed very positively from the last time we saw you all at the P&Z, the individual from the previous planning effort said it was a very valuable resource as they went through the planning process. We've discussed with Chris and Ethan and city staff the possibility of having a more detailed community survey up front for this as well. And actually, if you look back at this scenario 2 here, the public outreach bar goes across the entire process. So if we don't have the first, really more traditional town hall meeting or the big event until fall, there could be the possibility to have that more in-depth community survey available to people during the summertime. It could be sent out by mail, it could be online. Especially even if shelter in place is released or taken off the table, but people are still social distancing, it would give people time during the summer to go through the community survey at their leisure and ask questions. It'd be a period of input during the summer. We could also get the project website up during the summer just to publicize the effort, to really get it in the minds of people so that when hopefully we come back for meetings come fall, we have a little bit more interest generated. It's not just kind of sprung out of a box. We have input to really share with community from what we heard at the community survey process, and also input through the project website. So takeaways are there's things we could do during the summer, short of the larger community meetings, to get the process kind of going in the minds of people over the course of the next several months. So the review of previous plans, as Chris mentioned, he's going to send an email out to the CAT members, including you all, of a whole list of links and previous plans to review. And certainly, you don't have to review all the details of every little plan here, but certainly the previous master plan and the appendices is an important baseline foundation here to look at the future for the master plan update we're going to be doing. The 2019 Highline Canal Plan has a lot of detail, some of concerns areas away from Cherry Hills Village, but some of the major takeaways from that study, as we discussed really as we were approaching this plan and discussing with the community during our interview process, is a major element of discussion here in the master plan update process. The Quincy Farm Plan, we understand that process has been going on, it's nearing conclusion, but the takeaways from that may be very important for the master plan update. Same thing with that 2017 Cherry Hills Village traffic study, which was completed by our team member FHU. Just had a call today with Elliot and the folks over FHU, and that study being completed and all the takeaways from that is a robust set of information that really informs a lot of discussions for the master plan update concerning some of the key issues such as cut through traffic, how to mitigate it, how to manage it, safety for people walking and biking around the village, things like that. And also the 2016 Cherry Hills Village Trail Inventory. Again, was discussing that with FHU today. And, we're going to be digging down to more of the details of the trails in terms of different types of trails. But we sense that the multimodal travel and really the trail conditions and the trail system may be a key topic for discussion here in the master plan update as well. So this is, 5 plans here on the screen that could be key ones for you to review. Chris's email will contain additional ones, but this kind of gives you a sense of things we're doing right now and things that we can be doing during the next handful of months while the situation plays out before we go into more of the traditional elements of public outreach. So Chris, do you have anything to add, or Ethan?
Yeah, I'll just say that I don't think, the commission needs to take any action tonight. These are all just ideas for you to start thinking about. The one idea that, we probably, the one reason we may need to sort of get back together as a commission in this kind of format is if there's a desire to get a survey out, a mail survey out over the summer to let that, to sort of take advantage of this time that we're waiting. We would probably need to get the P&Z, not the CAT, but the P&Z together to talk about what the survey looks like, what are the kinds of questions we want, get agreement from the P&Z on that survey itself. So that would be the one aspect of the, I certainly am not comfortable with staff or the consultants unilaterally deciding what's in that survey. That really should be a function of the P&Z. And if the P&Z is not comfortable with having a format like this to have that discussion, then that probably helps decide whether or not we could do the community survey in the summer. But you don't need to decide that tonight. We're not asking you to decide that tonight. Those are just ideas to keep in mind and things for you to know that we're talking about on the staff and consultant side. So that's pretty much it. That's the update. So I would want to turn it over to the commission to just ask any questions or have any other discussion you want on the matter.
Commissioner Miles has a question.
Really quick, Britt, before you get off the phone, could you send us just those couple of slides from your deck with the schedule and then the slides that we're looking at right now?
Sure, no problem. Or I can have Chris or Ethan send it to you, whichever way is easiest. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, this is Ethan. I'll send those to you guys right now.
And again, remember those schedules. Those are just scenarios. Start thinking about how things could work. Those are not specific proposals. There are a multitude of variations of these schedules. It will not be either one of those that we end up doing. I guarantee you. They're just tools to help us start planning. That's all.
Yep.
So Chris, I have a question on how the decision gets made as to what the schedule actually is, and a request that we be involved in that decision.
Okay, sounds good. Kathy, I'm sure that P&Z is probably not the only one who wants to have that sort of input. So, I know that we will have the opportunity to relay that kind of information to decision makers in the city manager's office about that process.
The concern that I have specifically, it's not so much due process as it is giving the citizens the opportunity to participate in a manner that they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. In other words, the public meetings, I think, need to be put off far enough into the future, and and started at a point in time when people feel comfortable coming out in public and participating. Because
Not just because the shelter in place orders are lifted. It's got to be more about comfort and allowing people the right environment for them to feel good about it. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
it.
and this is, due process is not an entitlement in this case, but I think what you're talking about is fairness and access to information and a time,
Right.
session with sufficient time to deliberate.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think in that regard, when I was looking at it, I mean, like you say, maybe the process or the timeline is going to be a hybrid, but it's going to be way more like the second one than it is the first one. I mean, the first one is just not going to happen.
Yeah.
No, it won't. But, again, we weren't really trying to come up with a schedule that we wanted anybody to agree to. We were just trying to show you the kinds of things we're thinking about how this could work as we continue to get more information from the city manager's office, from the governor. And then also, checking in with you guys eventually. We may have another one of these type of meetings just to check in on this and see how everybody's comfort level is on certain things. And it may be not a lot of heavy lifting, but it may be just an opportunity to see how everybody's feeling with this process.
Well, Chris,
maybe that happens in the summertime or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think, Chris, in that regard, I mean, that if I can put a little, I guess my view is that seems a little bit more loosey. I think to a large degree, there is going to be a need for some P&Z discussions here over in the near term. I mean, to continue to push this forward and start making some of these decisions and putting a framework around it to provide some guidance going forward. It's not like, hey, kind of maybe if you guys want to do some things kind of in the summer. I don't think that's what it is. There's work to be done. Even if Schedule 2 is going to work, there's things that P&Z, I think, need to do and some decisions that need to be made to put that structure in place. I mean, how does everybody else feel about that? That's how I see it.
I agree. Maybe we can help with a questionnaire too, if we're pumping that out, and help formulate some of the questions.
For the survey?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with Earl. I think there's probably stuff that can be done without formal meetings, etc. Get the foundations of this in, or at least the dirt work done.
We will have to have a formal meeting, I think, for you guys to buy off on, sort of the survey. I think that makes all the sense in the world. I think you guys should probably vote on it even. Not as like a case or anything, just to show community support for your support of the survey. So that might need to be a formal meeting like this again. But do you guys think that that we should try and meet again in May, or do you want us to keep doing some of this homework, let folks get their feet under them, and tentatively plan on coming back in June?
Let's do it in May. I'm not going anywhere. Do it in May.
Why don't we schedule it for May, Chris? And if we don't have enough to talk about, we can cancel it.
It'd be May 12th.
I would, if that's the case, and we absolutely will do that. I think you all have some specific homework that the rest of the CAT may not, which is looking at the Exhibit C of the 2008 master plan. That's the previous community survey that was done. I think it's critical then that if we start thinking about how that might work, that get an idea about what was done last time. Not that we have to repeat it. In fact, I would say that we don't, but it just provides a great starting point for the conversation.
Right. I think that's where you'd start, is with the last one, right?
Yep, exactly right.
And I assume you can email that material to us.
Yes.
And it's online too, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It is online, yeah.
Yeah, better yet.
Is all of this online?
Yes, everything. The email that I'm sending out tomorrow to all the CAT members, it is links to the online versions of all of these plans. So there will be no attachments on the email.
Okay.
And I have, at least the master plan was hard copied to me in my binder when I started. So you might look in your binders for hard copy.
You're right, it's there. That's where I found it.
Were the attachments in there as well?
Yes.
Yes.
The exhibits? Yeah, okay, good.
So Chris, I have a question back to you. Do you have enough time to get done what you need to get done if we decide we want to meet in May? Or does that rush you guys too much?
No, I think the agenda for that would be the potential community survey and just starting the conversation about what that looks like. So if you guys can all take a look at that 2008 survey as the backbone of that conversation, I don't think we need to necessarily try and have a goal of having the survey. I think we just should start talking about what are the kinds of categories that we want to have for these kinds of questions. I think Britt can bring to the table a little bit about, what should the format and the overall length be, and begin to narrow and funnel that process down so that we can make some progress in May. And then we can start working on actual wording of questions coming out of that. I would also have a second agenda item of talking about the branding of the plan. And maybe that's more than just names. Maybe we even kick around a little, colors and graphics or a logo or something like that. So those would be the two big things that I guess I would throw on the table. Again, I think without the ability for the CAT to meet in person, and the biggest thing in my mind is without the ability to have a town hall meeting, for the whole community, the opportunities for the plan to go too far, there's an ending point for that at some point. But I absolutely agree. We can absolutely make progress on this in the meantime.
Good.
So those would be the two items I have. If anybody has anything else, please, I would love to hear from folks.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it seems like a meaningful way to get the process started without having to worry about public meetings.
Is everybody comfortable with this format to have that discussion about those items?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I think this works pretty good.
Absolutely.
Sure. So the May meeting, Chris, would be more like a work session than anything else.
Yeah, I would maybe even characterize it, and I'm sort of virtually looking at Kathy. I would characterize it as a study session.
Okay.
Unless you're going to take formal action.
Yeah, we are. I don't think so. So.
Well, let's plan on that if everybody's comfortable with it.
Because one thing about that community survey, I mean, for instance, if it was ready to go out today, which it isn't, but you feel like you'd get better response right now with everybody at home because they're stuck at home, et cetera, as opposed to when they're out running around, and that's when you don't get any response. So I actually think getting that community survey out while we're thinking that we're still going to be kind of in a more restricted or distancing type of a thing would be great if it's possible.
One thing I might add on the schedule as well. It differs based upon the community, but very often in times like July, early August, people are on vacation. So it's a natural time you wouldn't want to have community meetings anyway. June is about the latest you want to do it normally during the summertime. So if you get a lot of great input from the community survey during the summertime, we actually would have opportunity to come back and, everyone's hopefully back in the saddle by fall with some results of the survey, more to chew on than just kind of starting the whole process.
Okay. Well, if anybody else has any other comments, raise your hand. Otherwise, it sounds like we're about ready to wrap it up here, Chris.
I think there's also city attorney business that we have an opportunity for.
Oh,
okay.
Was there anything you're expecting me to talk about, Chris? I don't have.
No, I just wanted to,
Part.
I didn't know if you had anything and you wanted to, I just want to give you the opportunity. That's all.
No, I appreciate that. I am technically on the agenda, but with nothing to add. So thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments earlier. And if nobody else has anything, let's adjourn the meeting.
Hey,
Okay,
Chris,
everybody stay safe.
Chris,
Okay.
I'm just curious, since he's such a good resource, are there any updates on the city manager?
Yes, and I think the city attorney might also be able to chime on this as well. But I believe that he is agreeing to stay on an additional 90 days to help weather the unusual, unprecedented times that we're in. I think it'd be an interesting time for somebody to get started and really try and establish themselves and get up on the right foot. It'd be a really tough opportunity for somebody to do that. So he has agreed to do that. It helps that his retirement vacation that he had scheduled got canceled. So that makes that possible.
Yeah, it's
So,
not a pleasant thing for him, but yeah, I think with
No.
council has been worked with him to come up with that, and I think that's amenable to all.
And let me just say that Jim Thorson's willingness to volunteer and make that happen is very much in keeping with the kind of professional and the dedication he's given to Cherry Hills, certainly over the last 5 years. I mean, I think it was really, really terrific of him to do that.
Yeah.
Earl, I completely agree with you.
Okay, guys. Well, I think we should wind it down. Unless anybody has any more comments, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Terrific.
So adjourn.
Thank you so much.
DLC.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Ethan and Laura.
Stay safe.
Thank you.